was the first round, I would like to remind that now you have only 1 minute for question, no additional time for 30 seconds. Please, next speaker is Mr. David Lega.
Thank you, Mr. President. Executive Vice President, Commissioner, trade is one of our strongest EU tools for influence and partnership. And the EU has tried to cooperate with the People's Republic of China. Now we need to confront. On trade, the Chinese Communist Party does not play fair. And at the same time, both at home and abroad, it increasingly undermines democratic values and represses human rights. And I love free trade. But the Chinese regime has not earned the windfall profits which finalization of the Comprehensive Agreement on Investment would bring. In June 2022, on my initiative, this parliament recognized crimes against humanity and serious risk of genocide being perpetrated in Xinjiang by the Chinese Communist Party. I then asked High Representative Borrell what steps were being taken to either prevent or punish such atrocities. So now the question to you: how does the European Parliament's assessment of genocide against Uyghurs affect the Commission's mix of carrots and sticks in EU relations with China? Thank you.
Lūdzu, Dombrovskis.
Yeah, thank you for this question. Indeed, this is a question which is prominently on the EU agenda. There are dedicated formats to discuss human rights with China, notably the human rights dialogue, which last one took place on 17th of February of this year, where we are raising a number of issues at the highest level with Chinese counterparts, including in a situation in Xinjiang, but not limited to that. So clearly, this is something which is on the EU's agenda. As regards trade, as you know, we are currently developing our autonomous tools in this regard. For example, questions or initiatives related to due diligence, which is exactly there to ensure that European companies are not sourcing goods and services which are deriving with labor rights or environmental violations. This also concerns a specific legislative proposal on forced labor, which foresees a market ban of products made with forced labor in the EU single market. And generally, in cases when we are engaging with countries also on bilateral trade agreements, well, this is not the case with China. As you know, we're always insisting on ambitious trade and sustainable development chapter, addressing, once again, labor rights and environmental issues. Thank you.
Paldies. Nākamā jautās Inma Rodriguez Piñeiro kundze, lūdzu.
Gracias, presidente. Nuestras relaciones económicas y comerciales con China se basan en una competencia desleal provocada por la falta de reciprocidad existente. Hay que reconocer que esta situación se ha producido porque se lo hemos permitido y se lo hemos puesto demasiado fácil durante mucho tiempo. China ha expandido sobremanera su influencia en el contexto económico global a costa, en parte, de la economía europea, cuyas excesivas dependencias deben de corregirse. Por tanto, sin duda alguna, el gran objetivo debe de ser, respecto a nuestras relaciones económicas y comerciales con China, conseguir una relativa equivalencia de las condiciones. Por eso creo que es muy positivo que haya usted viajado a China, porque creo que a través del diálogo se puede avanzar, pero es necesario actuar y me gustaría tener algunos detalles más precisos del resultado de su viaje. ¿Qué considera lo más positivo y lo más preocupante después de haberse reunido con nuestras empresas allí y con las autoridades chinas? ¿Cree usted que China, después de esto, va a acercar posiciones hacia unas reglas del juego más equitativas o al menos se puede abrir una vía de acercamiento en ese sentido? ¿Qué resultados espera usted obtener del grupo de trabajo creado sobre cooperación tecnológica y regulación financiera? Muchas gracias, presidente.
Thank you very much for those questions. So maybe on the outcomes of high-level economic dialogue, I will be quite telegraphic because it covers a broad range of areas. So as I was saying, from our point of view, we were raising issues which are related with market access barriers. And one of the systemic issues, which is a relatively new issue, concerns Chinese data laws, especially regarding cross-border data flows. So we agreed to work on the mechanism to ease cross-border data flows, building on a commitment which was reached already in high-level digital dialogue, which was held earlier in September, and providing more clarity for European companies how to apply those new data laws. And that's indeed an issue of systemic issues. We had some specific deliverables on specific sectors, like, for example, on cosmetics, commitments from China to create so-called white lists that would exempt European companies, setting a working group on cosmetics, on infant formula, addressing the backlog of pending registrations of infant formula by member states. Chinese authorities committed to start this work already as of mid-October. Restarting the discussions and restarting the work on wines and spirits working group, setting up a working group on financial sector, focusing on a number of priorities, including also specifically on data flows in the financial sector, restarting our macroeconomic dialogues. So there were a number of concrete deliverables. I would say they probably do not amount to breakthroughs, but those are useful steps forward, and we need to build on this, and we need to make sure that while we are addressing some market barriers, new market barriers are not emerging.
Jā, paldies. Nākamais jautājums Daniela Kasparī kungam, lūdzu.
Sehr geehrter Herr Präsident, wenn wir heute über die Handelsbeziehungen zwischen der Europäischen Union und China sprechen, dann sollte es darum gehen, wie wir diese Beziehungen angesichts der politischen Lage in China im Interesse der europäischen Bürgerinnen und Bürger neu gestalten können. Aber offenbar vertreten nicht alle Mitglieder dieses Hauses auch die Interessen der Europäer. Wie dieser Tage in deutschen Medien zu lesen war, etablierte der Spitzenkandidat der AfD, Herr Maximilian Krah, hier ein chinesisches Lobbynetzwerk. Nach den Medienrecherchen sollen finanzielle Zuwendungen aus Peking an Herrn Krah und an sein Umfeld geflossen sein. Dass Herr Krah beispielsweise gegen die China-Resolution stimmte, und ich zitiere, die angebliche Ausbeutung und Internierung von Uiguren, Zitat Ende, in China anzweifelte, erscheint vor diesem Hintergrund in neuem Licht. Offenbar fungiert der Kollege als Außenstelle der kommunistischen Führung Chinas hier im Europäischen Parlament. Während sich die AfD in Deutschland also nationalpatriotisch zeigt, verkauft sich ihr Abgeordneter hier für kleines Geld an China. Meine Frage an die Kommission ist, sind Ihnen diese Berichte bekannt? Sehen Sie die Einflussnahme Chinas auch hier im Europäischen Parlament und wie stehen Sie zu diesen Vorwürfen?
Paldies. Vārds Dombrovska kungam, kad ir...
Yeah, well, I'm aware of press reports regarding this specific situation and this specific member. Clearly, it's something which we need to monitor very closely. What is a foreign influence in European politics and how it's being used, and we know examples from China, we know examples from Russia, so it's something which we need to follow very closely in the EU. Well, on the specific questions you raised, I think those are questions for German authorities to look into and to follow up. Thank you.
Paldies. Nākamā vārds Georgios Kirtsos kungam. Lūdzu.
Ευχαριστώ, Πρόεδρε. Έχουμε μείνει πίσω στον ανταγωνισμό με την Κίνα. Είναι δικαιολογημένη η κριτική που κάνουμε στους Κινέζους, αλλά βέβαια έχουμε και εμείς ευθύνες γιατί χάσαμε χρόνο. Έχω δύο ερωτήματα, αν μπορούμε να καλύψουμε αυτό το χρόνο με διάφορες συμμαχίες. Καταρχήν στα microchips, τα οποία είναι εξαιρετικά στρατηγικής σημασίας, οι παγκόσμιοι πρωταθλητές δεν είναι οι Κινέζοι, αλλά οι Ταϊβανέζοι. Το ερώτημα λοιπόν προς τον Αντιπρόεδρο της Επιτροπής είναι: υπάρχει ένα σχέδιο συνεργασίας Ευρωπαϊκής Ένωσης Ταϊβάν σε έρευνα, επενδύσεις, κοινές προσπάθειες που έχει σχέση με τα microchips, τα οποία παίζουν τεράστιο ρόλο, ιδιαίτερα τα εξαιρετικά αναπτυγμένα. Και το δεύτερο είναι ότι το Global Gateway έχει μείνει πίσω από το Belt and Road, αλλά οι Ιάπωνες έχουν το δικό τους πρόγραμμα, το οποίο είναι πιο εξελιγμένο από το δικό μας. Υπάρχει δυνατότητα συνεργασίας σε αυτά τα ζητήματα, δηλαδή Global Gateway, με τους Ιάπωνες? Ευχαριστώ πολύ.
Lūdzu, Dombrovska kungs. Jā.
Yeah, thank you for those questions. So first, you raised the important question of microchips, indeed, and semiconductors. It's obviously now drawing lots of attention at the EU level. So we have our own Chips Act to also boost the production of microchips in the EU, and once again ensuring the resilience and diversification of supply chains. And indeed, there are various work strands related to supply chains with Taiwan across the Commission, including with DG Trade, DG Connect, DG Grow, DG RTD. And also specifically to come back to your question, at last year's Trade and Investment Dialogue, we launched a dedicated work stream on semiconductors. So this is something which is featuring quite prominently in our relations with Taiwan. Well, as regards our cooperation with Japan, obviously we are engaging closely in many areas across different sectors. Actually, later this month I will be traveling to Japan for a G7 meeting, but also use this occasion for bilateral engagement with my Japanese counterparts, and obviously as like-minded partners we are working closely across a range of policy areas. Thank you.
Paldies. Nākamajai vārds Lucia Volo kundzei. Lūdzu.
Allora, durante l'ultimo discorso sullo Stato dell'Unione Europea, la Presidente Ursula von der Leyen ci ha informato di un'indagine sulle auto elettriche cinesi. Egregi colleghi, la verità è che dovremo prendere decisioni su quando la Cina sistematicamente compie ai nostri danni, o meglio ai danni dei nostri imprenditori. Sappiamo no che esistono aiuti di Stato che gli imprenditori cinesi ricevono e che sono finalizzati ad un'esportazione a prezzi assolutamente non competitivi? È nel rispondere a questa domanda che l'Unione Europea deve fare la differenza. Vorrei soffermarmi sull'articolo 5 del regolamento europeo 2016-1036. Secondo questo articolo, se un imprenditore volesse promuovere un'inchiesta antidumping, dovrebbe rappresentare il 25% della produzione totale del prodotto realizzato dall'industria europea. una percentuale troppo alta, quasi impossibile da raggiungere per le piccole e medie imprese. Capisco che il 25% sia un numero ponderato con l'Organizzazione Mondiale del Commercio, ma questo numero esclude proprio le fasce più esposte, le piccole e medie imprese. La domanda è questa, sì. È possibile considerare nuovi strumenti anti-dumping specifici per le piccole e medie imprese o considerare una revisione dell'articolo 5? Grazie.
Paldies, jā, lūdzu, Dombrovskungs tieši par jautājumu sadaļu.
Thank you for this question. Indeed, as you mentioned, President von der Leyen announced this investigation, anti-subsidies investigation on batteries electrical vehicles. And it must be said that the Commission is launching this investigation ex officio, meaning on its own initiative. So we're not waiting for a complaint from industry, but are acting based on the data and information which we are having, and that possibility of ex officio investigations exists also in other TDI instruments and can be used more frequently. Sometimes, indeed, it also may be useful in cases as you described that if if there's no 25% of European industry which is filing as a specific complaint, because indeed it's true, it's a problem for SMEs, it's a problem for smaller member states, if it's a regional problem, if it's not a problem across the whole EU. So we must look indeed how to make those possibilities more effective to be able to launch those investigations, but also I'm just drawing the attention on the ex officio tool which we are having. Thank you.
Liels nākamajam jautājums José Manuel Fernandes kungam, lūdzu.
Muito obrigado, Sr. Presidente. Um cumprimento ao Sr. Comissário pela sua disponibilidade permanente para aqui estar. Nós temos um déficit em termos da balança comercial que se tem agravado. São já mais de 400 mil milhões de euros. A União Europeia reage, e reage lentamente quando devia ser proativa, e os governantes têm muita responsabilidade. A pergunta é, não considera que devíamos ter investimentos em projetos estruturantes comuns para reforçar a autonomia estratégica? Acha que, da União Europeia, acha que o STEP vai ser aprovado e tem a garantia que os Estados-membros que tanto defendem a autonomia estratégica da União Europeia a vão reforçar? É que isto também ajuda a diminuir este déficit da balança comercial. E, por fim, o acordo Mercosul não seria extremamente importante para nós reduzirmos as nossas dependências face à China? E também acordos, por exemplo, com a África. Não estamos a esquecer estes dois continentes, África e América Latina?
Paldies, lūdzu, koncentrēsimies uz Eiropas Savienības Ķīnas jautājumiem, lūdzu.
First of all, indeed, as I had been repeating quite a few times also already now, this imbalance in our trade relations is a cause of concern, and this figure of almost 400 billion euros is certainly speaking for itself. So we need to seek more reciprocity by addressing market barriers, which we do in a targeted way, as I was describing, but indeed also by developing strategically our own industry, our own production capacities, and indeed the STEP initiative will help us in this regard. So we need to work, I would say, on both strands. seeking more reciprocity from China, but also strengthening our own industrial and production base. I will now not go into specifics of our trade relations with Mercosur and Africa, as indeed it's outside of today's topic of discussion, but it's true that we need to seek diversification of our trade and investment relations around the world, strengthening our trade relations with Africa and EU's neighborhood countries. It's something which is outlined also as priority in our trade policy strategy. Our stronger engagement with Latin America, including Mercosur, is also of major importance in this regard, both economically and geopolitically, because it's true, if we'll be absent from those regions, China will be there to fill the void, so better we act proactively and engage proactively with those regions. Thank you.
Paldies. Nākamajam jautājumam vārds Bart Grothuis kungam. Lūdzu.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Commissioner. I was glad that you raised the issue of espionage and also cybersecurity in China and Beijing. Well, last week, an EU institution, ETSI, which sets technological standards here in Europe, here in France, said very quietly, very silently, it was hacked. It didn't say anything about criminal intent, ransomware intent. It was very quiet on that. Together with the Cybersecurity Agency of France, ANSSI, it made public that it was hacked. Of all states, of all adversarial states, only China has a clear strategy to influence tech standards, to influence it and to become less free and to introduce censorship in our technology. What I would like to hear from you, and my question to you therefore is, do you have any technical artifacts from that hack that point towards China? Is there any indication that China was involved in this cyber operation? Because if it was, it is unfair, like you said. It is unfair trade and competition. It is espionage, and it is another example on how the European Union and Commission should act towards China to reverse the low-cost, low-risk, high reward for China and actually do something about it. Thank you very much.
Lūdzu, Dombrovska kungs, jums vārds atbildēji.
Well, thank you for this question, but I must say I'm not aware of this specific case, and well, this broader question of cybersecurity, cyber resilience is not part of my portfolio on European Commission, so I'll not be able to provide more detailed comments on a specific case, but I'm sure that the colleagues who are working with the specific files will be in a position to comment. But in a case, the angle of engagement with China on this was through their data flow laws, which are intertwined with cybersecurity laws, with their anti-espionage laws, which present a systemic barrier of making business for European businesses in China, and which creates substantial difficulties in cross-border data flow. So that was the angle through which I was addressing this issue with China. But as you know, those broader cyber resilience, cybersecurity issues feature prominently in the EU agenda, and clearly it's something where we need to be on alert, where we need to strengthen our cyber resilience, our cyber security, because true that in a more digitalized world, in a more digitalized economy, this will become more and more important, both from security and from economical point of view. And we know that there are malign actors of different character in the world which are willing to undermine our cyber security, cyber resilience, and therefore we need to be ready and protected. Thank you.
Paldies. Nākamajā vārds Suzana Čekardi kundzei jautājumam. Lūdzu.
Grazie Presidente, grazie Commissario. L'Unione Europea è un grande partner commerciale della Cina, il terzo per le esportazioni e il primo per le importazioni. Quindi capiamo, è evidente che la Cina ha intenzione di vendere ma meno di comprare. Chiede le frontiere aperte ma tiene chiuse le proprie frontiere. È una globalizzazione a senso unico e questo deve cambiare. Per esempio l'Italia con il governo dei 5 Stelle firmò il memorandum della Belt and Road Initiative e da allora abbiamo aumentato le esportazioni di 3 miliardi ma la Cina le ha aumentate di 26. Quindi il dumping commerciale che tutta l'Unione Europea ha subito in questi anni a danno delle imprese, a danno dei lavoratori, con la nuova strategia per la transizione green non potrà che aumentare perché la Cina non ha alcuna intenzione di cambiare la propria politica commerciale o anche sulla transizione ecologica. Quindi che cosa avete intenzione di fare per evitare che il dumping aumenti? E poi avete parlato, oggi ha parlato giustamente della investigazione, dell'indagine che ha annunciato anche la Ursula von der Leyen, ma non ce ne potevamo accorgere prima? Perché così tardi?
Ask main question, so we cannot burden. Valdis Dombrovskis, the floor is yours.
Thank you for those questions. Well, indeed, the issue of trade imbalance with China is there, and as I had been outlining before, that was one of the key topics we were addressing. Both in high-level economic dialogue with China, but also in bilateral engagements with Chinese counterparts. And we were making some progress in addressing some of the trade barriers, but clearly more work will be needed in this regard. And indeed, I would say in generally more conflictual geopolitical situation, we need to be able to defend ourselves, defend our companies when other countries are not playing by the rules. That's why we have been developing in recent years our autonomous toolbox to deal with situations like this. And that's also why when you look at the European trade strategy, it has 3 keywords: open, sustainable, and assertive. So in this case, I would emphasize this word assertive, that we'll be pursuing more assertive trade policy in defending our interests and rights. On the anti-subsidy investigation on battery electrical vehicles, there are 2 elements which are important for launching the investigation. One element is presence of trade distorting production side subsidies. And second element which is important is threat of injury for EU industry. And maybe a few years ago, as I was mentioning before, market share of Chinese brand battery electrical vehicles in the EU was below 1%. So it was not a threat to the threat of injury for EU industry, but now it raised rapidly already to 8%. So this threat of injury for the EU industry is there, and we are immediately reacting. Thank you.
Kiitoksia, komissaari. Ja nyt sitten edustaja Miriam Lexman, olkaa hyvä. Teillä 2 minuuttia.
Thank you, Commissioner, for being with us. I have 2 questions. The first question is, after our ban of combustion engines by 2035, Chinese electric vehicles have flooded our markets, and you have already answered to a couple of colleagues what measures the EU is taking in order to protect our interests. But my question is the Commission ready to review this ban? Should this be the only way how to protect our economic interests? Second, Beijing has quashed Hong Kong's freedoms and autonomy, which also has major impact on its standing as a financial and trade hub. There is even a strong evidence that Hong Kong is being used by Russia to circumvent our sanctions. Isn't it a time to finally review Hong Kong's autonomy, as was requested by this House on multiple occasions, including the agreement on customs matters, the status of Hong Kong's office in Brussels, or its membership in the World Trade Organization? Thank you.
Kiitos ja sitten komission jäsen.
Yes, thank you for those questions. So on the first question on battery electrical vehicles, well, as I was mentioning, indeed, in a matter of few years, Chinese brand battery electrical vehicles share in EU market has increased to 8%, and if you are not acting, this poses a threat of injury for industry. That's why we launched this anti-subsidy investigation, which we are now going to pursue and take decisions in line with the findings of this investigation. It's clear that prima facie there is evidence that we need to act on this situation. Well, as regards the 2035 deadline for combustion engine vehicles. It's something which has been decided by co-legislators. So at this stage, I would not focus on reopening those discussions and reopening those deadlines, but rather focus on ensuring a fair competition in the EU market, where European companies are not at the risk of injury due to unfair practices by other countries. So that would be my focus on this specific regard. Well, on this question on sanctions circumvention, indeed, that's something which we had been raising with Chinese counterparts also during my recent visit. In 11th sanctions package, we had 3 companies based in China and Hong Kong owned by Russian nationals, which have been identified as specific vehicles for circumventions of our sanctions. And those companies are now subject to more stringent export restrictions on dual use and advanced technologies. And we are working with member states' customs to identify other entities that had been circumventing our sanctions through China or Hong Kong. Thank you.
Kiitokset. Ja sitten edustaja Lexman, haluatteko lisäkysymyksen? Anteeksi, nyt onkin vuoro Sean Kellyllä. Olkaa hyvä.
Valdis, it was said during the recession that some banks were too big to fail. And I suppose, paraphrasing that, we could say some countries are too big to ignore, and China is obviously number 1. For that reason, I welcome the EU-China high-level economic dialogue. Now, for my country, the Irish dairy industry is hugely important and have been exporting infant formula to China for some time, but I think that is somewhat under threat now. So in your discussions with the Chinese, how did the discussions on infant formula market go, and what is the likely direction of travel in the near future? Because I saw an interview yesterday with the ambassador to Ireland from China, Mr. He, saying we should concentrate more on an ageing population rather than infants.
Thank you for this question. So indeed, when I was mentioning that we are focusing on specific market access barriers in our meetings, infant formula was one of those issues we had been raising. And it may sound as relatively niche, but actually EU is covering around 75% of China's market in infant formula, and it constitutes around 18% of our total agricultural exports to China. So actually it's a major issue, and that's one area where Chinese authorities committed to work on the dealing with a backlog of applications from EU companies in this sector and start those start this work already as of mid of October and do also necessary on-ground inspections. So hopefully in a matter of few months this backlog of applications can be clarified. So I think there we have good commitments from the Chinese side. Now it's important that those commitments are properly implemented and properly followed through.
Kiitokset. Ja sitten edustaja Pekkarinen, olkaa hyvä.
Arvoisa puhemies, komissaari Dombrovskis, oli hyvä, että kävitte Kiinassa. Teidän asenne matkallanne oli mielestäni oikea. Täystörmäys Euroopan unionin ja Kiinan kesken ei ole hyvästä. Olen samaa mieltä kuin Yhdysvaltain valtiovarainministeri Janet Yellen. Hän sanoi tämän saman. Täystörmäys Kiinan kanssa ei ole hyväksi Amerikalle, ei liioin Euroopan unionille. Kun von der Leyen käytti puheen täällä EUn tilasta, hän samalla kertoi, että ryhdytään toimiin, jossa katsotaan, että miten Kiina tukee omia yrityksiään. Kiina oli jo reagoinut vähän aikaisemmin siinä, että germaniumin tuonti Eurooppaan, siihen Kiina pani esteitä. Ja Kiina suunnittelee myöskin kestomagneetteja, jotka ovat muun muassa tuulivoiman ja sähkömoottoreiden kannalta ihan avainasemassa olevia raaka-aineita ja tuotteita, myöskin niiden rajoitteita. Saitteko minkälaisen vaikutelman, onko odotettavissa, että Kiina käyttää uusia tällaisia rajoitteita? Ja kun puhutte yritystuista, niin muistitteko sitä, että Euroopan komissio on myöntänyt 4 000 miljardin edestä jo poikkeuksia valtion tukiin Euroopassa?
Kiitokset ja komission jäsen.
Yeah, well, first of all, indeed, as you mentioned, given this China's role in the global economy as the second biggest economy in the world, given the China's role as our trading partner, second biggest EU trading partner, it's important that we stay engaged with China, that we have a dialogue and that we are seeking solutions also to difficult questions we need to deal with. Well, you mentioned the US administration. It must be said that also from US side, maybe some time ago there was lots of talk about decoupling, but actually following the EU statements that we are not seeking decoupling, we are seeking de-risking. We see that US is also now talking about de-risking their relations with China, and there has been also some high-level US-China engagement in recent weeks and months. Well, on the specific question on germanium and gallium, as I already was mentioning before, we have indications that EU companies have requested licenses to export germanium and gallium. Those licenses are currently being processed, and we are monitoring this development closely to see whether it actually ends up as an export restriction from Chinese side. When I was raising this topic with Chinese counterparts, all in all, they were making reassuring noises that companies need to apply and that companies will be getting those export licenses. So now we need to see whether this is indeed the case. But also it's important that we look at the broader diversification of our supply chains.
Kiitos. Ja sitten lopuksi Barry Andrews, olkaa hyvä.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, I have a question that relates to the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. As you know, European companies are preparing for this directive, especially companies with supply chains in China. And many of these European companies rely on ethical trading audits. And these audits are carried out by third-party companies. And many of these companies hire Chinese nationals to carry out on-site visits at factories that are within their supply chains. And as you can imagine, it is very difficult for Chinese nationals to call out human rights abuses that they may identify in these on-site visits. It therefore underlines the deficits associated with these ethical trading audits. And as we transition from the soft guidelines in this area to the statutory obligations in the directive, I wonder if the Commission is aware of these deficits in ethical trading audits and what supports you can give and reassurance to European companies that rely on these audits. Thank you.
Kiitokset ja vielä komission jäsen, olkaa hyvä.
Thank you for this question. Well, indeed, the due diligence legislation is currently with co-legislators, so we are working on this. Of course, we need to see what exact outcome of the legislative work is going to be in this regard. But it's clear that we also need to engage with the EU industry to see how to ensure meaningful compliance for EU industry to have a possibility to comply, to make sure that it does not end up as an excessive administrative burden for EU companies. So we are clearly ready to engage also with European companies on all those aspects to make sure that we have a smooth application of this due diligence regulation.
Kiitokset ja näin on tämä kyselytunti päättynyt.